anyway, so we're just gonna dive straight into the topic for today. And but through this entire study, the whole purpose of the study will be achieved only if you're able to walk alongside with your life experiences, or where you stand in all of this that we're going to discuss. So what we're going to discuss today is um, one second, expectations. Okay, those of you who've been in the youth for more than 4 years now, we've discussed this about 4 years back, I think, and I think it's very relevant to everybody. So we're going to discuss this again. But again, it's very important that you walk through this with your own life. And because this is, I'm not going to preach anything because one, I'm not worthy to preach. Two, this will not make sense as theory. It only makes sense if you take it into your own practical life. And for those of you who are very kind enough, I request you to switch on your video so I don't have to see all my own face when I speak. But I mean, whoever can. So we're going to look at, oh, hi, everybody. So kind of all of you. Okay, we're going to look at two, maybe three passages today, and we'll look through some themes that explain this topic. First, we're going to look at Matthew 21 to 15. So quickly, okay, let me see if I can read it. Yeah, okay. I'm going to read this very quickly and then we'll go with verse by verse. This is the parable of the workers in the vineyard. So, for the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. So he told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard. I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon, about 3 and in the afternoon, and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day doing nothing?" And they said, "No one hired us." He said to them, "Okay, you also go work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired first, and then go on to the first." Then the workers who were hired at about 5 in the evening, that is the ones who were last, came and received each received a denarius. When those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but when each of them also received a denarius, when they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These who were hired last worked only for 1 hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered them, "Am I not being unfair to you, my friend? Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Are you envious because I am generous?" Okay, so I just quickly read this passage, but we'll look at it a little deeper. But I want you to relate yourself with the laborers. Okay, obviously the laborers. So just look through this, relate not just with your just things around you, but also with your relationship with God. For example, if we look at the first one, the landowner went out early in the morning, and he hired workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius. So okay, I'm going to say this in second person so that you may be able to relate better. So look at it. When the master called us, okay, we were without purpose, we were nothing, and he chose us. He chose us for his vineyard. So when you receive his invitation, you gladly embrace it, saying, "Okay, you know what, I was nothing, I had no purpose, I was lost, and this landowner is giving me work for his vineyard, and he's giving me 1 denarius, either 1 denarius, 5 denarius, I mean, who cares about that?" But you see how precious that is, and you're like, I'm so unworthy, but still he's calling me to his vineyard. So you're so happy, and then you go to work in the vineyard. Now, same thing, you start working over there, and then you're just so joyful, and you along with others also, right? And you all keep talking. Imagine, you're working in the vineyard and you talk to each other, and you're like, "Man, master, I mean, he's just so awesome, no? I mean, like, I was just like nothing, and I really thought I was worth absolutely nothing, and he called me to do this work." And to do this for him, like, you know, for those of you who know Tamil, like Tamil dialogue, no, or kaal edila na kaalam pooruma ninnu olappe, like that kind of dedication sort of thing. That's what you're feeling. And imagine there's another worker over there who's really literally in tears saying, I thought I was just going to die like this. So then, you know, you're working so hard, and you're all, you know, appreciating the master, and you're working harder because you see how precious this is for you. And then, you know, the landowner, 5 times through the day, he goes and then he finds people, and he tells them, okay, you also come, okay, you also come, you also come and work. Now, what happens? Let's say, for example, you're a carpenter. Okay, these are all bunch of carpenters. Let's say, for example, so the whole day it's hot, it's sweaty. The whole day you've been working. You're the one measuring the wood. You're sawing. You're sanding. You're doing all of that. You measured it. You're cutting the wood. You're nailing it together. You're drilling. Maybe had a few accidents in between. All that you do, and then from 5 o'clock, one guy comes, he hammers 2 nails, and then they say, okay, okay, work for the day is over. Okay. And now it's time for the money. Now you're waiting in line. Remember, the people who came, the last batch gets the money first, and you're waiting in line last because, you know, you came first, right? So remember, the order is the ones who came in last were the ones who were getting the money first. So you're waiting in line somewhere at the back, and you're still like, oh, you work so hard, but you feel so good. You're so tired, but you feel so good. And you're waiting in line now. So the guy from the last batch, remember that guy who just identified 2 anis? That guy walks back, he looks at his hand at what he got, and he's like, he's just, you can just see the pure joy and delight in his face. And he walks back, and you're like, okay, happy guy, good for him. Madhuri, you're just standing there. Then, you know, more and more people get their money, and maybe somebody in your batch. You know, you see one guy coming, and to a few people in front of him, he goes and he's like, Macha, you know what? And then imagine a few other people in front of you have just, what? And then, you know, he's like, you know what? That guy, no, he came last. He had suffered only 2 anis. He also got 1 dinaris. And everybody's like, what? He also got one now? Huh? That's not fair. And then you're also like in your mind was, huh? That's not fair. Oh, full day I only stood in the sun. I only did this. How he got? He didn't do anything. Okay, so that's your thought. And then when your entire batch gets the same 1 denarius, now slowly people begin to grumble. Slowly, like, you're just like, what is this? 1 denarius. He also got. Why should I get only one? And then you're arguing with the landowner. These, you know, people in your batch argue with the landowner saying, you made us and them equal. We slogged the entire day. We bore the whole burden, and then you're giving them the same reward. That's not fair. Now, the landowner very simply just says this: am I being unfair to you? Didn't you agree to work for 1 denarius? Correct? No, we agree to work for 1 denarius, and then you're given 1 denarius. Correct only. So then he basically says, are you envious because I am generous? So you're standing there and you're probably like, yeah, you know, it probably hits you really hard, saying, okay, what is it for me? I mean, why should it matter to me, right? Because sometimes we're so caught up in this whole thing that initially, you know, when the master hired you, you're like, wow, okay. And then later when you get your pay, knowing that somebody else has got the same pay, you're like, wow, okay. Do you sense that shift in mood? Sometimes we become so you know, there's obviously a sense of dissatisfaction around there. You suddenly feel discontent, and maybe you're being a little selfish, and maybe quite self-centered also, because you're only seeing what is in it for you. Sometimes we become so inwardly focused, we only think about ourselves. You know, initially you gladly agreed, you very gladly agreed, and you were talking about how amazing and awesome the master is, and suddenly you're grumbling against him. um, Sometimes we can be at a point where we're never satisfied, although we receive what we want. We get what we want, but we're not satisfied. But those know that batch that just trusted in the master, they're exceedingly happy. They're just like, okay, because they didn't fix any pay. Master said, whatever I feel is right, I will pay you. And they got that, and they were just exceedingly happy. Um, so if you look at situations in your life, there may be times where you're uh, not very happy about other people being helped, or other people being recruited, or where is my due. That could probably be a question. Or I didn't get more, I should have got more, I deserved more. Sometimes we miss out on how God is working in other people's lives because we're so inwardly focused. And our entire happiness sometimes is based, or entire discontentment is based what other people have, or what other people think, not what I didn't have. You may have, but then you focus on what somebody else also has. So that's one of my questions. Do you base your passion on other people's certification for you to be as a Christian? All the speakers who come to church, I know them very well, they know me very well, they think I'm a good Christian. Is that your certification for being a good Christian? Or somebody else in the youth group gets the limelight? Okay, so again, relate it with small incidents in your life and get very minute. It can be as minute as, for example, let's say in the physical youth meetings. Okay, obviously not the virtual one, but the physical, I mean, virtual also, but in, say, in a group youth meeting, after the speaker finishes speaking, not somebody like me, some good speaker, okay, somebody finishes speaking, and then they say any questions as usual, and then let's say you ask a question and the speaker answers that question. So you've asked the question, speakers answer the question, happy. Somebody else asks the question, and the speaker says, that's a very good question. Now you have to think for yourself what goes through your mind. Are you like, okay, I knew that answer, I mean, this guy didn't even know that? Or are you like, oh, speaker didn't say my question was good enough? Oh, is that what goes through your mind? So it can be as minute as that. Or why didn't they tell me? Or sometimes you're trying so hard to prove that you're a good Christian, that you know more, and that you're aware of more. We sometimes get into this whole rut of comparing I wouldn't say it's because you don't know God. This is a great struggle that is there within Christians itself. What about me in the Christian life itself? Okay, so we'll look at another passage, the second passage. From just this image, can anybody guess which passage this is? Yes.
The prodigal son.
Prodigal son, yeah.
Very good. That's a very good answer. Okay, yeah. So you're right. The passage is about the prodigal son, but what we're going to focus on today is the prodigal son's older brother. That's the part that we're going to focus on. Okay, so we'll just go to the recap of the whole thing. I know most of you know. I'm just going to quickly go through it. So there's a father. There are two sons. The younger son tells the father one day, "Listen, give me my share of everything." And the father, the whole family is devastated. The father is just like heartbroken, and then he pleads with him, but then okay, he just gives him whatever his share is. This younger brother takes it, goes away, gets into bad company, spends all that money, and then ends up working in a pigsty. And then he's like, I just cannot do this anymore. I mean, he just literally cannot live. So then he's hoping that he can go back to his father's house and live there at least as a servant, just for pure survival reasons. So very hesitantly, he I mean, he goes back. But contrary to what he thought, the father, when he was a long way off, saw him and goes running to him and hugs him and kisses him, and then takes him back as his son. And the father is so delighted, he's so happy, and they decide to rejoice and have a dinner, let's say, whatever. So there's celebration going on. Now that's about the younger brother. Now we look at the older brother. Okay, so this is the part that happens after that. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what's going on. So the servant said, your brother has come. Your father has killed the fattened calf because he's back safe and sound. Now the older brother became angry and refused to go in. You know what that looks like? I mean, if you can imagine a scene, it probably looks like this, where, you know, this is the older brother and he's just like, I won't budge. And this is the father saying, "Are you please, please, will you please come? This is your younger brother." And this is the younger brother over here. Okay, so just going back to the passage. So his father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered the father. So the elder brother, this is what he says: "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends." But when, okay, so that's what he says. I have been doing everything you asked me to do, and like a good boy, I stayed back. And then you didn't even give me, what is he comparing all just for one mutton biryani, basically? Basically, that is the main thing, just for one mutton biryani. And this, and he says, yet you never gave me a young goat. But when the son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes come home, you kill the fattened calf for him. So you see what he's comparing it with? I did what is right, he did what is wrong, and you do that for him. How is that even fair? That's what he's trying to. That's what he's trying to ask, and the father is trying to explain to him and say, "My son, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate because this brother of yours, your brother was dead and is alive again. Your brother was lost and is found." The language here, the elder brother says, the son of yours has squandered your property. He doesn't say my younger brother. So, you know, he's talking about okay, I'm gonna continue. Yeah, so he's talking about the younger brother, and he says, this is your younger brother, who has come back again, right? So just a few questions. What were the elder brother's expectations? Can any of you tell me? What do you think? From any perspective, feel free to tell.
He also wanted to be celebrated.
Okay, he also wanted to be celebrated. Yes.
He wanted to be treated better than the younger brother.
Treated better.
I think he wanted to also make sure that that the younger brother got some rebuke or something like. But that wasn't the case. But rather, he showed love even after what he has done. So he's very disturbed over that. Like that.
Okay, so he expected that the younger brother got some form of punishment. Okay.
He felt entitled. It's mentioned in the chat. Yeah.
Anyone else? What else was the elder brother's expectation? Or if you were in the elder brother's position, what would be your expectation?
He wanted that appreciation and validation from his father.
He wanted the appreciation and validation from his father. Correct. Okay. Fine. I've just listed a few things down which may relate with us also. Okay. From the elder brother's point of view, I don't like him now, so no one else must like him. Okay. He's talking about in reference to the younger brother. So many times that can happen to us also. I don't like somebody, so you also must not like him. Okay. My opinion should be the benchmark followed. I should be asked first. Okay, you have an opinion, that should be the one that everybody, the one that everybody else should follow. Like Sushil said, I feel he should be punished. I feel the younger brother should be punished, so he should be punished. The father should have asked me because I have been obedient, the father should have asked me, saying, what shall we do now? Shall we punish him? What is the form of punishment you would like to give him? That sort of thing. So please relate this with your own life. I must be the one rewarded for sticking on. Why should he get it? Right? So what I want, others must know without me telling them. Sometimes even when we talk about reward or even this, two things. One, it can be wrong. So I deserve this. I deserve to get something. I waited for so long for marriage. No, I deserve a good one, or I deserve a very good partner, or I followed God's ways all along. I deserve this admission. God will get me a great admission somewhere abroad, or whatever your thoughts are. The other thing can be that very deceptively, it is that you work so hard as a Christian, you're a good Christian, you want others to talk about you, but you don't want them to talk a certain way. You want them to talk saying, such a good boy that guy is. So silently he does all the work. He doesn't want anybody to know. He very silently does. Just think through for yourself if that's what you expect or you want people. Just these are not things we say, but these can be things in our hearts that you want people to appreciate you within their circle silently. You see how deceptive that is? You're not trying to silently do something, but at the same time you want people to talk about it, right? I deserve something more. I did something right, so I deserve something more. I don't see how that is different from karma though. With loyalty and dedication, I can win people. So you can work, and within the church and be a good Christian, or even within whatever forums that you're in, and you can win people over. I have a right to expect until you comply, I will not cooperate. Okay, you're not going to budge from, okay, maybe I can let it go. If it was me, it would have been the other way. So, from the elder brother's perspective, he may think, okay, if I was the one who went and squandered the wealth and came back, I wouldn't have got celebration like this. The younger brother would, which probably is an assumption from his point of view. But think for yourself. I mean, this is a very common line. I struggle with this all the time. And it is very real. I can just say that the struggle is real. Not just with your siblings, it can be with friends, it can be with people in church, it can be people at work, it can be anything. I'm right to be angry. No, we want that validation from people. I mean, we go to people and be like, correctly no. Like Malayalis have a perfect way of saying, that's shariya alle. And then you're forced to answer whether it's alle or not alle. So we somehow to make ourselves feel a little at peace, we have that alle question. So sometimes our happiness can just be based on what somebody else got, not what I didn't have. You may have, but is your joy based on what somebody else has and what somebody else got, or didn't get, or whatever? What happens to others affects us so much, and that may not help us at all. It may not help them at all, because it's like one slow poison sort of thing. So it brings us to a point where we cannot participate in the joy of other people. When there's good news for other people, we sometimes find it difficult to participate in that, very practically speaking. Let's say, when somebody else is overjoyed about something or has victory in some way, need not only be work, in some way, we miss out on participating in that joy with them. Where so inwardly focused that we can only think about, oh, then what about me? Sometimes you miss out on sharing the joy. Say your friend is getting engaged or something, you miss out on the joy of fully being truly happy for that person, because you're still struggling with jealousy or bitterness that you don't have a relationship of your own. Could be that. Let's say you have a big family coming to visit you, and all you can think of is how tiring it's going to be, how much work there's going to be, and how you have to adjust in the living room and share a bathroom with 5 other people, probably. Okay. So let's say there's Bible study, when there's physical Bible study. Let's say somebody who's in charge of the snacks is not well, and they call you and say, listen, I won't be able to do snacks, I'm not well, or my mom's not well, so can you take care of it? Just think, if the first thing you think of is, are you okay? Okay, don't worry, we'll take care of it. Is that the first thing you think of and you're wondering, oh, okay, I hope he's okay? Or is it that, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do a million things. I can't stay back and talk to people. I can't drink my chaya in peace. Is that the first thing that goes through our mind? And most likely it is a high possibility. Right? I can't stay back and talk to my friends. That is probably a very, very, very common thing that happens. It happens to me a lot, so I'm confessing. But self-absorption, sometimes, we only look at how it affects us. So that is like a slow poison. Self-absorption is a slow poison, and it will work its way into our hearts, and then automatically into what we do or what we don't do. That's what commonly happens. And when somebody else announces good news, it's an effort. We need to train ourselves to push against the desire of thinking of how it's going to affect us, how their news is going to affect us. Like, if you have a colleague who's leaving, who's got another job and who's leaving, is the first thing you think of, like, oh my gosh, my workload is going to increase, what am I going to do, what is the replacement person going to be like? Or are you genuinely happy that, hey, you know what, I'm so glad that guy's got a good break? Is that what you're looking at? We have a way of finding fault with everything sometimes, especially Malayalis. Okay. And I say that as a proud Malayali, but we have a way of finding fault. We have anything generally, I mean, you may have noticed, പോരാ അല്ലേ കൊള്ളാം എന്നാലും പോരാ, like that. So as Christians also, let's say, especially during this pandemic, there are communities from other religions who have been feeding, who are doing a lot of community service now. Okay. And it's the first thing that crosses your mind, like, oh my gosh, thank God somebody is choosing to go and do this. Or is the first thing, I mean, do you rejoice that, okay, so many people who are actually without food are being fed, at least they did something? Is that the first thought that comes? Or are you like, oh, they and all are doing only for good works, this and all won't take them to heaven? Is that what crosses your mind? Because that's something I'm still trying to answer for myself. I know the answer, but I still that's something I still struggle. That's a question I struggle with, because as Christians, I think we need to challenge ourselves instead of arguing and discussing endlessly about whether the church should open, or this church is open, or that church is open, and taking the risk to go back and listen to sermon after sermon. What are we doing? Take that same risk to go feed a few people. Who do you think the people who are being fed are going to actually look at as a model? So if there are hardly any Christians out there, I don't see where evangelism during this pandemic has happened at all, unless it is within the communities. I hope you're able to relate with what I'm saying, because that's the challenge I want to place. I mean, we talk, we discuss, we have Bible study. What are we doing? I'm not suggesting that, come on guys, go out, don't wear mask, just open yourself to infection and then go feed the poor. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it's worth taking the risk for something. I personally feel, but that's my opinion, I personally feel that we waste a lot of time talking and discussing world news and world Christian news, which is just discussion. There's no doing in that. Where is evangelism in all of that? I don't see. So you have to take a conscious effort to train ourselves. It will take time to automatically think of the other person, to automatically think of the good happening to somebody else is intentional conscious effort. Okay, it's not gonna it may not happen automatically, but it will happen, that I can assure you. And don't expect it to happen automatically. Don't expect it to be like, God, I don't want to struggle with expectations, so please God help me, and then automatically you start thinking of other people. It doesn't really happen that way. It is a conscious effort that you have to do. Okay, so if we hypothetically look at what would have happened in the parable, let's say both for the workers in the vineyard and the prodigal son, I mean the elder brother, for the workers in the vineyard, they would have all rejoiced looking at the new people that came to work, the new recruits. They would have all been like a great team. They would have been like the model team ever. Everybody would have got the best teamwork award or something. And they would have worked harder. They would have worked a lot harder together. They would have been happy for each other. They would have mutual respect and mutual appreciation. And even there were, even when you're working there, if there would be others you knew who didn't have work, you could bring them to the master and say, Master, this person is in need of work, and you'd be rest assured that the master will always take them in, and you will all again jointly be in awe of the master, because the master doesn't stop with a few people, right? If you look at the prodigal son, the brothers would have had like, and the elder brother would have rejoiced over the younger brother's return. Um, they would have had a beautiful relationship as the elder brother and younger brother. Um, the elder brother would have been the one who stayed back and never gave up, and the younger brother would always look up to him, saying, I would have never done what he did, but he did that for me. That would be the model that he followed. And jointly, they would have seen the joy of the Father, right? So that's something in your own lives that can still happen. If we look at our true model, Jesus Christ, in Philippians 2:6-8, it talks about, I mean, these verses are very familiar to you, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Okay, Jesus wasn't focused on the pain he was going to endure or the loss of the earthly relationships that he was going to miss out, but he humbly submitted to the Father's will. Okay, two verses before that, if you see, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility value others before yourselves, not looking to your own interest but to the interests of others. See, this verse is very clear that it's normal and it's reasonable to consider your own interests. Okay, it's very reasonable and normal to consider our own interests. It just admonishes us about being focused on more than just ourselves. Okay, it says value others above yourselves, not instead of yourself, right? Okay, now if you were to consider your own situations, there are many changing circumstances in our lives collectively, commonly now, definitely with the pandemic. There are many changing circumstances now, and if you were to look within and answer, how have you reacted through this time? You have family at home, you're always surrounded by people. Initially, everything, I mean, I'm not talking about that initial phase where everything was just like, oh, wow, every day is a Sunday, it's awesome. I'm not talking about that phase. What happened after that and how you reacted? You have family at home all the time. What are the thoughts that run through your mind initially? Your use of social media, our use of social media, you know, to a point where, has it gotten to you so much to a point where you either send a message on a group, let's say the MTCUS group, you send a forward, and then, you know, there are many messages that nobody replies to, people just read and then move on with it. Somebody else send a message and everybody's like, whoa, great share, man. Does that affect you? Something as minute as that, or your social media itself, you put up a comment or you put up a picture and you still measure likes, you still measure how people have approved you. Have you checked up on other people? I mean, 2 weeks back we discussed about people silently struggling, youngsters silently struggling, and 2 weeks later I have the same question for you. You know how other people are doing. Okay, I want to close with one more passage. I mean, it's a really short one. It's the one where Jesus is talking to his disciples and he tells them about the rich young ruler and what happens after that. Okay. Jesus looked at them and said, so he's telling the disciples, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Now, this is the important. Peter answered him, of course, Peter. We have left everything and followed, we have left everything to follow you. What then will be there for us? And then Jesus has a response. Okay. Now, okay, we'll read the response. Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on the 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life. That's what he says. Okay. So I have just two questions. Okay. What was the expectation? What was Peter's expectation? You feel free to unmute and answer. It's just two questions. What was Peter's expectation? Or which was the expectation?
We have left everything to follow you. That was.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else wants to add?
Compared to others, getting a better reward.
Okay. Correct. Now it's that same verse, and both your answers were right. We have left everything to follow you. What then will be there for us? His expectation was to get something for having sacrificed everything. And ironically, it's for God. You're saying, I have sacrificed everything for you, God. What's in it for me? You know, if you can relate it with your life now, not as Peter, but as yourselves, try and make that connect. What is in it for us? We left everything to follow you. So you may also say, I gave up my ambitions, I gave up my I gave up the desires of my family, I gave up this, I gave up that. Now, what are you going to give me? Okay. The next question is, what was Jesus' reply? This is easy. You can tell me. Jesus replied with two things. What are the two main things Jesus said? Okay, fine. I will say it. Okay, so the two main conditions that Jesus had was to leave everything. Everyone who is left, I mean, everything. Okay, and when you say you leave everything, the one who leaves everything doesn't have a desire to get it back or to take it back. Okay, second condition is for my sake. The purpose of leaving it for Christ's sake is not to get something else back. Okay, so there were two conditions: to leave everything and for my sake. So that's, again, we come back to that whole question of, you know, do you go to God for who He is or what you want? So it's a question of contentment. It's a question of, are you satisfied Are you just satisfied and content theoretically, where you're like, as a Christian, yes, I am full of joy. I am completely content in Christ. Are you just making those jargon statements, or do you truly mean that? Because, when we come to God, God guarantees us love, acceptance, peace, joy, and the greatest position of being His child. Okay, but do you still place your expectations on people or on God for something? That's the only question. For love or for recognition or for something. Sometimes it's only Jesus plus something. Of course, Jesus, but plus something. That always remains the question. So I'm through with this, but right through this entire discussion, it would have only helped if you related it with your own life. So this is definitely for us to think through, and you can spend more time with both the main passages, thinking, okay, where do I stand in all of this? Now, where have I been standing? Where do I want to stand as well? That's something that is worth thinking through. So I'm through with this. If anybody would like to share or add something,